What I'm going to tell you could put a damper on your excitement for the future and alter the way you relate to females in this society, but it could also startle and horrify you. If you disobey even one of these regulations, you will be banished to a dark, icy place with disgusting food. These guidelines, which are sometimes known as laws, are plainly obvious. The second set of regulations, however, is more subtle. You won't go to jail for violating the second set of rules. In fact, you could find that it helps you conquer one of the most common challenges that men face, striking up conversations with women. Because it is a product of civilization, this unspoken code is present in every community. Keep in mind the two primary ways people express themselves verbally and in writing if you want to get a handle on how this all works. As a whole, most people in society, including girls, rely on the first alternative, which is known as indirect communication. To avoid coming across as impolite, people often resort to indirect communication, which consists of stating something without actually saying it. Although there are numerous contexts in which indirect communication is really beneficial, it often backfires, particularly when you're a man. Imagine a situation where you were invited out on a date by a girl you had feelings for, but she declined, saying something along the lines of, "You're cute, but I'm not interested." Even though she usually doesn't state it out loud, "Sorry, I'm not attracted to you physically." That's likely the true reason she said no. Before we can figure out what to do, we need to know where these two forms of communication came from. The default option for most females is indirect communication, which is usually seen as a more feminine style of expression. The polar opposite is direct communication, which was the norm for men until the previous several decades. However, many men now prefer to communicate indirectly, which can be problematic when interacting with females or even other men. There are a lot of men who mess up. Consider the following scenario. You are in a restaurant, and the waitress approaches you and asks whether you are ready to place your order. When the waitress doesn't seem interested in the guy who asked, "Yes, may I have the chicken Alfredo, please?" Many of the men will act startled. Even more crucial than the words you choose to use are the way you pronounce them or the tone of your voice. Saying, "Can I have the chicken Alfredo?" The man sounds as though he is requesting the waitress's approval to order it. In this hypothetical situation, the waitress would kindly inquire, "What would you like to eat today?" By saying, "Yes, I'll take the chicken Alfredo," you're effectively conveying to her that you won't care if she approves or not. You're not even asking for permission to eat the chicken Alfredo. Remember that desire is a primal urge over which neither sex has any agency. Most girls have an innate attraction button that you can activate by speaking confidently and directly to them. Consider the actor who portrays Thor in the Avengers films and his speech pattern. He is typically quite forthright, particularly when interacting with women, and he makes it seem like everything he says is crucial. Just by telling yourself that what you have to say matters, you will give it more weight. This is the most alluring way to speak around girls, yet it's also the polar opposite of how girls normally communicate. However, the advantages of strong, straightforward communication do not only apply to females. Men will appreciate you more if you speak to them directly and passionately, especially if they are more reserved or indirect speakers. Take the following scenario. You and a female companion are at the movies, and she remarks, "BRR, it's cold in here." She is probably trying to tell you to let her borrow your jacket in a subtle way. Just like a warrior, direct speech is male, but indirect speech is feminine. Plus, with the exception of girls who are naturally more masculine, most girls will find a man less attractive if he comes across as too feminine. A key motivator for girls' inclination for indirect communication is their genetic predisposition to avoid conflict, given that they are more susceptible to harm than boys. You can flirt with girls indirectly if you want to, but you should stick to plain, straightforward communication most of the time. Girls actually prefer it when males act this way, but they assume most guys won't, so it's a big plus for the men who pull it off well. One of the most essential ways to demonstrate self-assurance and aggression is through direct speech, which is a hallmark of dominating males. Be optimistic with whatever you say when speaking directly, whether it's to girls or boys. To rephrase, you want to come out as completely convinced that the other person would agree or comply with what you stated. A scenario is more likely to turn out well if you approach it with an optimistic outlook from the get-go, whereas a pessimistic outlook will lead to less favorable outcomes. When we say, "I want you to go to the dance with me tonight," we are being much more straightforward than when we ask, "Will you go to the dance with me?" While that may work in a Disney film, asking a girl out in a roundabout way isn't the best strategy in real life. The simplest method to start asking for things with an attractive, straightforward tone is to start sentences with the letter I and to use statements rather than inquiries. Confidence and bravery are on display when you tell someone something as if it were true, even when you know that they might disagree with you. The truth is that the most courteous way to handle an issue is frequently the most unappealing way for a man to do it, and a lot of males nowadays communicate indirectly because that's the socially expected thing to do. Since we spend the majority of our time talking, it stands to reason that if you can adopt a more warrior-like tone of voice, both sexes will begin to perceive you in that light. Like learning to ride a bike for the first time, practicing public speaking might be intimidating for someone whose entire life has been spent communicating in a roundabout and weak manner. On the other hand, it's healthy to be uncomfortable sometimes, since that's when you're developing personally. You only get to witness the final cut of a major film when you go to the theater. The completed product would not have been possible without the endless takes and repetition. Just like you would still find a girl who is now a healthy, desirable weight. No one cares if you were once an awkward, insecure person. The same goes for women. Your current self and your potential for future self are all that really matter.